Welcome to the Cultivating Success podcast. Jeff Sophir and Jonathan Wolfson are brothers and business partners of the top landscaping company, Nature's Experts. Nature's Experts is home to 6 companies that cater to all your outdoor needs. To learn more about Jeff and Jonathan, simply visit us at www.naturesexperts.com. On the podcast, Jeff and Jonathan bring together other business owners and entrepreneurs to share with you how they developed a prosperous company and how you can too. You will gain insights and meaningful advice on creating the building blocks to success and longevity in the entrepreneurial realm. And now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sophir and Jonathan Wolfson.
Alan, thanks so much for joining us on the Cultivating Success podcast. Happy to have you here today and excited to hear what you have to say, actually. You work in an interesting department in Transworld Business Advisors, where it has to do with commercial real estate. And I feel like, we wanted to have you on the show today to kind of give your insight, knowledge, and also a resource to people so they know how to connect and use these tools properly to help grow and advance their business. So thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. My thanks to you and Jeff for having me on.
Of course. So I think let's start with, please let me know what exactly at Transworld, and let the listeners know, what exactly is your position at Transworld?
Sure. I'm the commercial director for Transworld for the state of Florida. I'm a former practicing attorney. I transferred over to commercial about 25 years ago. I was the first Florida guy into the Marcus and Millichap office, and then was a managing director at Coldwell Bank Commercial, and then came to Transworld. Because what we found is often, a seller who owns a business and owns the real estate, many times the real estate has appreciated at a greater rate than the business. So we're able to maximize value by getting a greater value for the real estate as well as for the business.
Interesting. Would you say that most people, when they're selling their business, do they not think that they want to sell the real estate with the business, or how does that usually work out?
It's a great question, Jonathan, because some people think I'm better off keeping it. I'll keep it as an income stream. I'll get the rent on a monthly basis, and I won't have to pay capital gains. Personally, I think it's always best to sell the two together, and we've had great success since I've been at Transworld in doing that. It really is a personal preference and estate planning preference as well as to what you want to do. But I think the value of the real estate is always highest when you have a functioning business in it, because let's say that business for whatever reason does not make, or they need a larger location and they move on, then you have to sell an empty building, which could be good to an owner user, but it could take you much more time. So I think it's always best to sell when you have a good functioning business in the real estate.
So I'd like to talk about the other flip side of the coin of that. So, me constantly thinking a bit about business and how things work. And, when people exit, there's all these different strategies that you come up with. So, selling your real estate with your business, you have to charge a fair market rent to yourself. So a lot of times business owners are charging less than fair market rent to themselves for a property that they currently own. And the thing is that if you're selling the property with the business, you less really have to establish what that fair market value is, because they're going to own the asset anyways. It's their own asset obligation versus it just being a, changing of cash flow at that time. It's obviously contributing to an asset. So do you think that most people, Alan, really understand that component when they're selling their business about, what standard rent would be for something, and then how that impacts the purchase price of the business if they weren't getting the proper rent?
Well, that's one of the challenges we face on a daily basis at Transworld, because many people who own the real estate and the business will either not be charging themselves rent or will be charging themselves a below market rent. So when we recast our financials of the business, we have to make an accommodation for the difference between what they're paying themselves and some sort of market rent, some comparable market rent. But still,
so an accommodation, just so everyone knows, is a reduction in purchase price ultimately, because if you're charging yourself less rent than what would be standard rent rates for the location, size, and density of your business, it ultimately means that it's going to reduce your cash flow, Reducing your cash flow is reducing your profits. Reducing your profits means that the number you take from your profits times whatever multiple you're trying to sell for would be less than, but by multiple times. So it's not like, oh, I was charging myself $1,000 less a month. Well, that's $12,000 a year times however many multiples you're trying to get.
Exactly, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 times, but that's going to happen in every scenario, whether or not you're just selling the business without the real estate, you still have to put in a market rent factor. What can happen also is, lease assumption or assignment has become very difficult today for a number of reasons, which we can talk about if you like. But many times what will happen is if you're in a below market rent and you're just a tenant, the landlord may look to move the new business owner up to a market rent. So that's going to have an effect in value as well. The difference is that if you own the real estate and the business, you will recoup the amount that you're losing for the value of the business in the sale of the real estate. Because if you've got a higher rent, you'll be able to get a higher purchase price for the real estate.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Do you think that when people, so if you would, let's touch on the point of, you were saying that people usually when they're selling their business, which I know a lot of people listening are entrepreneurs and they're looking to actually possibly purchase multiple businesses. But I'd like to talk about the fact of people when they are exiting. What do you think the reason is people when they're exiting, they don't do their due diligence? They're smart enough to hire a business broker, but they're not obviously astute enough to understand what else they need to be doing to maximize their dollars as they're exiting.
It's a great point. I talk with sellers all the time about putting the real estate in the best possible position. That could be pressure washing. That could be repainting the exterior. That could be cleaning out some debris inside to make it look better. You want to do all of those things to make sure that the real estate looks better. You want to make sure that you keep, tenants in place and all of those things. But for whatever reason, I think basically the person who's built the business, that in many cases, not like you and Jeff, where you've put together a portfolio of very excellent related businesses, but sometimes they may only own one business, and that's their retirement. That's their 401k. That's, their savings plan. And they are so focused on the business that often they don't look at the big picture. That's why they need someone like Transworld, like our excellent agents at Transworld, to help them position the business for the best possible value.
So, Alan, when you're purchasing a business, let's talk about the opposite. What if you have a business existing and you're trying to figure out, how can I acquire another property to keep building up my business? Do people come to Transworld for that as well?
100%, because, quite often, and as you're proving, you and Jeff are proving, when you put together 2 businesses or 3 businesses, you've increased the buyer pool, you've increased, the potential value, and you put yourself in a discussion of perhaps, getting into the private equity group who would purchase the business, who, might pay more because they need to acquire and want to add to a portfolio. It always also is a possibility that you may find someone in the same industry and you can sell to them, but you're bringing a greater mass of business, which will lead to a higher purchase price as well.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's, for what Jeff and I are trying to accomplish, it started out by just wanting to grow the business and to continue to add multiple streams of revenue. It's really where it started with the flower shops and the interior plant maintenance, and then subbing out the landscaping services and the tree services, and then starting to acquire all of these different services. So we could figure out, how can we really capitalize on all of these different opportunities? How can we create more streams of reoccurring revenue? And by doing so, we've really developed an unbelievable team. And, I think once you start getting a really great team underneath your belt, so to speak, it kind of charges you a different way in the sense of, how can I help these people grow? How can we help each other? How can we work together to ultimately make the best possible business that we can? And, to me, I feel very fortunate we're not in a business where we're selling a widget. We are selling a service and quality, because quality is very hard to define a lot of times, especially if you're selling a product. So to me, I think that, selling a service, it constantly keeps you on your toes to keep striving and pushing for the best.
I mean, I think that's a recipe for success, because, many people in Florida are very leery of contractors, vendors, people that they work with, because they're not sure that they're going to be there down the road, and that they will take care of them down the road. But putting together all these products and services that are related, creates kind of a one-stop shop. And eventually, when you put all of these together, you'll sell this probably to some private equity group down the road.
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? The sky's the limit. Right now, it's about the people. It's about building the best business possible that we can, and elevating our team within, to do the best that they can do, and, help them reach goals that they didn't think that were possible, particularly in this industry. And to me, it's very exciting that a lot of investment companies are getting involved in the industry, because it's going to make what we're doing much more finite and just not available. When things are not available, it's going to be much more in demand. So there probably will be a whole bunch of smaller companies that will be out there that will be doing great work as well. And there'll only be a handful of companies that are our size. And then there'll be the ones that are owned by investment companies that constantly are fighting for the lowest price, while we are capturing the market for people who are wanting the best quality.
But if you look at any trainer, any motivational speaker, any success manual, they will tell you that the way to have a more successful business is to get the people involved, so that they feel they have a stake, so that they feel they have a say in the business, so that they can take some ownership in their mind of what they're doing. And that seems to be the environment that you're creating. And that's the environment that Andy has created here at Transworld.
It's really amazing that Andy has really done what he has done, as far as I'm concerned, because I just never would have thought that, he would have started with one business, and literally just by starting with his one business, get involved with someone to really make it what it is today. With how many offices are there actually?
I think we have 200 offices nationally and internationally now.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's all in the culture, Jonathan. It's all starting a culture. We're in a business where people can be very aggressive, but there are rules and lines, and everyone is made to feel that what they do is important to the success of the business, and the company. And that's a successful way, I believe, to run a business and to grow it, because then people have they have a personal feeling. It's not just a job. It's something that's important to them.
I think that's one of the things that I have learned recently, is that it's very important, obviously, to, really keep your head down in the beginning. And you really have to grow the company to a certain size to get the opportunity, just period, to really even be able to start casting your net bigger, to really encompass other people's dreams and aspirations as well. But that's really, I think, where it's worth it, in the sense of, it does take time, but it doesn't take forever, and you have to make enough money to really be able to invest in other people and doing and trying things that you haven't previously tried, to figure out, what are my other options? What other things can we do to do better? And, how can we do it? And the only way to do it is by just literally trying new things constantly.
And it's a process, some things will work, some things won't work. You try the next thing that will be more successful, and you keep building that way.
Exactly. It's been a very exciting process to just learn. And, I am not personally driven by money specifically as my primary reason for doing things. It's really just, it's quality of life. It is really leading by example, and it is striving really just to, at a minimum, just do your best every single day, and to know that it actually can pay off, and does pay off is really exciting in the sense of you're like, wow, you don't really realize what you're capable of until you really start trusting other people, because then you can start really having that compound effect go into it as well.
And the goal has to be success. The money will flow. If you're successful and you create that kind of environment, the money will flow. I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they focus on the money, on the dollars. And that really is not a long-lasting proposition for success.
Well, I think, that's really what happened with Jeff and myself, is that he had a business that was successful, and he was willing to just invest into me. And through investing with me, we just kept investing and investing and investing and investing until, we got to where we are right now. And, we're really at the point where it's been worth it just because we were willing to risk it for so long.
That's great. It's got to be a tremendous sense of accomplishment to have gone through that and, to be where you are now.
Well, it's one of those things where it's a great accomplishment when you take a second, but then you also think to yourself, I haven't come this far only to come this far.
Agreed. And you're still on the high wire act, so you have to still be careful. There is one thing we touched on earlier that I would like to go back to, if you don't mind. Please. And that's, I do believe that owning real estate with a business increases the value of the business as well. And I'll give you a perfect example, because if you own the real estate, you're not at the mercy of a landlord. You're not at the mercy of rent increases. You're not at the mercy of, if you're paying taxes and insurance, let's say on a modified gross lease, you're not in the mercy, of those increased expenses. You own the building, and you control your own destiny. And that's becoming exceptionally important today, because lease assignment and lease assumption is becoming more difficult each day, because many of the landlords who have tenants with below market rents are looking for every reason that they can to bring those rents to today's market rent. And in addition, for instance, in industrial, which is our hottest property type and has been for quite some time, used to be that annual increases were 3%. Today, landlords are looking for annual increases of 4 to 5% each year. So in whatever way they can, whether increasing the annual increases, whether increasing the rent, whether trying to get, pay taxes and insurance, which are two of our biggest problems today, not necessarily taxes, but insurance is going through the roof because of everything that's occurred. And, unfortunately, every day you turn on the news and there's another natural disaster. And interest rates, higher cost of money. Those are really two problems that we face in commercial. So if you own your own business and you then sell your business with your real estate, the new owner does not have to worry about what will happen at the end of the lease term. So I believe it adds additional value to the business.
Well, so let's dissect that a little bit. So I believe that really has to do with specifically, Alan and I work in South Florida specifically. He's in charge of the entire state, which we of course can get to, but we both live in South Florida, and in South Florida specifically, the number of people that are continuing to come here is increasing by the day. And the amount of commercial and industrial property that they are allowing in comparison to that isn't changing. So I feel like the market in general, as far as real estate, if you own a business now, to purchase the real estate with your business has literally no other way to go than up.
I would agree. We had 319,000 people relocate to the state of Florida in 2022. It's continuing in 2023. We have a shortage of raw land, so we're in a redevelopment phase. So what you're doing is, for instance, you're seeing a shopping center, let's say that's 30,000 square feet on 2 acres. You can buy that property and add additional square footage, or knock down the 20,000 and possibly build 60,000. So I couldn't agree with you more. You may feel like you're paying up a little bit for the real estate, but buy the real estate now. It will only appreciate as more people come, and there's less new development, and development has kind of stalled a little bit because of the higher interest rates, higher cost of goods, and of course the higher insurance. So
which really allows for an opportunity zone right now to where instead of it being aggressively going up and to the right, the prices are still high, but it ultimately means that it's not as competitive to purchase some of those pieces of real estate. But the trend is the same, regardless with COVID, regardless with anything. Over the last, 20 plus years or 40 years, South Florida, Florida has been growing at an exponential rate and is going to continue to, especially as it's starting to target a lot of people in the tech industry and other industries to really come down here as well also too. All of these people are going to need the resources, the infrastructure, and especially as values of properties are going to go up, it's going to be more important, especially in the service industry, for people to want to take care of their homes because they're going to actually value them more. Is the home that's valued at less, you treat it like what it is. A home that's valued at more, you're going to treat it like what it actually is versus what you paid for it possibly.
I think you've seen the benefit of that, through COVID and after COVID, with people now putting more money into their homes because they realize, they have a valuable asset. They want to have it appreciate. They also want to enjoy it while they're there. And many people feel, yeah, I could sell my property for more money, but where am I going? So I'm better off increasing the value of the asset that I currently have.
That's right. It's an exciting time in the market because I think that there is some clarity at this point. There's a lot of uncertainty looming around just the whole world. But, a lot of times you have to kind of put blinders onto that and look specifically at your market, what you're looking to do, what you're looking to accomplish, and the bigger things that would have to actually happen for it to not go a certain direction. I can't think of one reason why real estate commercial in South Florida would ever go backwards.
I don't think it will at all. As a matter of fact,
ever. And listen, if you had an investment that could give you some tax depreciation items, but you had zero chance of losing money, zero, it's a good investment because you have all of the upside to gain and there's no downside. A lot of times, you're managing risk. And through managing risk, you want to make the best decision that you can. So as a business owner, if your option of risk is close to zero because of the amount of people that are coming to this area, it is really something that is important that you start targeting where you could purchase, where it could help your business, move your business if necessary. Because if you are going to sell, if you do want to create that residual income in the future and you're not concerned and you want to keep the property also too as an income generating resource, it's something, again, there's more people coming here. All the trends are going towards real estate. Commercial is going to be continuing to increase in value because they're not allocating any more of it, or it's so unbelievably complicated for them to do so that it makes it almost cost prohibitive to the regular person, because they're going to do, if they do something in like Palm Beach County, it's going to be a very large swatch of land. And then it's going to have to be surrounded by something else that's going to be zoned correctly. And it's going to be part of an enormous redevelopment project that is going to be geared towards one group of people, but it's not going to be geared towards the regular small business owner. It's going to be geared towards big warehousing, big manufacturing, and things where you need a lot of square footage. They're not looking to try to make a whole bunch of 2,000 square foot bays. They're not really going to be making any more of those.
There's a tremendous demand in every size. There's a tremendous demand. And the market really is shifted into two sectors. Anything that's large, anything that's very well located is still getting high premiums. And the other sector is still doing well. And I've noticed recently that there's more activity. 2023 has been an interesting year in commercial real estate. So there was a little bit of a period that was quiet, But now I've noticed that people are back. So what that tells me is that they perceive that there will be opportunities. They perceive it's a good time. They don't want to miss out. And I think that, long term, commercial real estate in South Florida is going to be very strong, even throughout the state of Florida, because we live in a terrific state. We're very blessed. No state income tax, great values, terrific weather. Occasional hurricane. Nothing is perfect, but other than that, we're good. And I think that people will continue to come here as they have problems in the Northeast, California. You see everything that's happening in other areas of the country. It's unfortunate, but it's bringing people to South Florida.
Yep. So Alan, let's touch on the last one, which I would like to talk about, which is negotiating right now. So with higher interest rates, but a limited resource that's only available, how do you really recommend people to start negotiating for properties like this right now?
Well, some people have a style that they believe they should start with a lowball offer. I don't think that that's the best way to do it. I think you start with a reasonable offer and you leave yourself a little bit of room in which to increase your offer. You also have to make a decision, asset by asset, how much that asset is in demand. If that asset is in demand, you're going to have a shorter window in which to negotiate, or someone else is going to come and outbid you, which is not always the worst thing either. I always advise never fall in love with the real estate, never overpay for the real estate. But you want to make sure that you've done your due diligence. You want to make sure that what the rents are in the area. If you're purchasing, for instance, a piece of property, you need to check the assessment, the tax assessment, where it is in the county. Because let's say the property is assessed at $1 million and you're buying it now for $3 million, you have to be prepared for a tax increase, which is going to affect your value. May not happen immediately. Sometimes it could take a year and a half till the county catches it, but you have to be prepared for that. You also have to be prepared to see what your insurance costs are. So doing your homework, doing your due diligence, making sure you know what you're facing, and don't put in lowball offers, because many times what it does is it turns the seller off. It discredits you with professionals that you're working with, brokers, attorneys, and it's not really the way to go. But I've noticed recently that there are more lowball offers that are coming, which basically tells me that they believe that there's an opportunity that will be coming. And people think, there'll be these tremendous steals. There will not. There are too many people bidding against real estate. You will get value. You will get good opportunities, but don't over negotiate the deal, because what happens many times is a seller, as much as I advise them not to bid too low, they will bid too low, they'll lose the property, and then they'll come back to me and they'll say, why did you let me lose that property? And I have to remind them, do you remember we talked about, putting in a reasonable offer, having some logic behind what the offer is instead of just throwing a number against the wall. So be careful, be strategic.
Is there something to the point of, as a business owner, should you look at what rents go for in that area and then reverse engineer and say, I'd be willing to pay up to what the mortgage would be? Is that a strategy in which you ever recommend people to look at, or no?
I think it depends on the seller. For some sellers, that's a little too complicated. They want something more simple. For institutional owners or professional investors, as I call them, people who only invest in real estate for a living, that's a possibility to do, because they understand it as well and they will do it the same way. I'll tell you a story. I had a client that I dealt with for years, and whatever I would show him, he would offer. If it was $5 million, he'd offer $3 million. He'd offer $2 million. He'd offer $1 million. He'd offer lower prices. So one day what I did is I took his property and changed the name of the property and sent it to him as a new opportunity. And he told me he wanted $5 million. When he saw his own numbers, he said, I would only pay $3 million for this. So you really, true story. You really have to be careful, but you have to know, with whom you're dealing with. Is it, an estate? Is it an attorney? Is it, what we refer to as a local buyer, a mom and pop, or local seller, mom and pop? Is it institutional? And I would cater my offer based on that. The other thing that I would advise to do is to come in with a proof of funds and show the ability to close. Have, a pre-approval letter from a lender to show that you're ready to go. All of those things make a difference. It's not just price, it's also terms. If you're going to offer a little bit less, be prepared to close all cash with a short due diligence. Those are things that will get sellers' attention, and that's the best way really to, to purchase if you're going to offer something a little bit lower.
Yeah, we purchased a piece of property recently where unbelievable location, plenty of parking, which parking is always complicated here in South Florida for what we wanted to do. The property was located far to the left with a large parking lot to the right. It was really exactly what we were looking for. So when we went through the due diligence, we made the mistake. The owner had just done a mopping of the roof. So when we went through it, you don't, ultimately what happens when you do a hot mopping of the roof or you do some sort of coating onto the roof is it gives you the illusion that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. And literally 6 months after owning the property, we had to redo half of the roof on the property because it was leaking. And it didn't really come up on inspection just because the roof looked clean and you couldn't see the problems that they had it was literally just covered, and they did it right before they sold the property. So that is something I'd like to share as something to warn people about, to really do a very, very thorough roof inspection. And when you notice something being done recently, don't take it for face value that it was actually done correctly.
You have to do your due diligence. It's not only financial due diligence when buying a building, it's physical, structural due diligence. What's the condition of the property? What's the condition of the mechanicals, the AC, the plumbing, all of those things, because you don't want to have a big surprise, when you close and something like that happens. I'm sorry that, that happened to you. That's unfortunate. It's too bad they didn't pick it up in the inspection.
No, it's one of those things when this, I would say, is the complication of being an owner user, is that when you find something that fits what you're looking for, which is very difficult, you're almost willing to overpay for it just because you're like, there isn't a lot of options down here. But then at the end of the day, you really have to analyze and at least, it's not about overpaying. It's about understanding what your risk threshold is. It's not about, oh no, you overpaid. Oh no, the roof this. You have to understand there has to be contingencies to what you're doing and how you're thinking and what you think is going to actually happen at a property. And that's really something that I learned particularly from it. Wasn't to, spend more time on due diligence, which I think we could have, and to have better inspections, which, listen, I think you always can do better. But it was really more to understand the contingencies that you need to put in place to allow yourself a cushion of understanding, I really want this property, but if this and this happens, I know it's still a good property.
But a value of a property is different depending upon who will purchase it. For an investor, the value is one thing. For an owner user, the value is greater because it goes back to what we talked about previously about it increasing the value of your business when you go to sell, when you have real estate and a business. So it's unfortunate that you had to put in a new roof, but meanwhile, or fix the roof. But meanwhile, moving forward, it will increase the value of your asset, and I'm sure you'll sell it for more whenever that time comes down the road.
Of course, there's always the opposite end of the coin where you can kind of think to yourself, all right, well, we did have to do this, but roofs do have a certain lifespan. If you do if we sold the property in 10 years, it's only 1/3 worn out. It's still very enticing to people because 20 years of roof expectancy is humongous. And especially in South Florida, you really can get a little bit longer, I found, as long as you're doing, maintenance where you're not letting cracks and actual water get into the roof.
Right.
So if you're savvy in the sense of understanding how to maintain something, it really can be a little bit less concerning than you might think.
I'm sure that investment will work out great for you down the road.
So Alan, thank you very much for joining us today. Is there anything else you want to add to our listeners before we sign off here?
No, it was my pleasure. If I can ever help you or Jeff or anyone listening, please, it's Alan Kaye at Transworld. We'll be glad to help in any way that I can.
Well, Alan, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate you joining us on Cultivating Success podcast, and I am certain I will be talking to you soon.
Thanks, Jonathan. Take care.
Thank you.
This has been the Cultivating Success podcast with Jeff Sophir and Jonathan Wolfson. To learn more about Jeff and Jonathan and their businesses, visit www.naturesexperts.com.